Do we have any worries about John Blackwell and the fact that he hasn't announced his return to Wisconsin yet? Plus, the biggest offseason addition, most underrated player in the roster, and that women's basketball program that added a ton of talent in the portal. How are we feeling about that? All that and more today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. And of all the places you could be, thank you for spending a little bit of time here. There's a ton of options out there. I really do appreciate you being an everydayer, making this one of your first listens. Today's episode, we are talking about John Blackwell. Should he have announced his return to Wisconsin yet? Are we worried there? Most underrated piece of this basketball team right now. Xavier Zens recruitment starting to pick up a little bit, plus the women's basketball program. A ton of content today. Stoked to have Grace back on the show. Grace, a couple times on the show now. Grace Cannizzo, junior at the University of Wisconsin, student sportscaster. Really excited to have you back on. I want to start here. John Blackwell, still nominally in the NBA draft consideration, hasn't withdrawn from that. Do you have any worries there?
I honestly don't have big concerns. I think it would have almost been odd in the first place, or look like he was giving up a little bit if he had already pulled his name, if that makes any sense. I think it honestly makes sense that he's waiting a little bit longer. He hasn't, again, done exceedingly well or anything like that. And even if he got a slight bit of interest, I don't think it would be worth, even money-wise, the name he can make himself at Wisconsin. He's talked a lot about that with Greg Gard, too, and about how he wants to be a name someone remembers, not just enter the transfer portal. Of course, he would come back to Wisconsin, if not the NBA. But I don't think he's going to find anything a great opportunity within the NBA. And I honestly think it would up his chances to excel in the NBA to take another year. So I'm not too concerned about him not drawing out yet. I think it makes sense to wait another week or two to see if anything improves. But yeah, I wouldn't sound the alarm bells just yet.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly with you. For people tracking, the early withdrawal deadline is June 15th. You have to pull your name back out. So Wisconsin still has some time here, obviously. He wasn't invited to the draft combine, which is usually a pretty good sign where NBA franchises kind of feel about you. Like he wasn't on that list of the 100 or so that were invited. And I think the other part of this is where NIL has made the decision a little easier for people. Previously, maybe you had more pressure to go chase the money professionally. And now you can come back and you can make pretty good money at Wisconsin, Division I basketball. Worst case, though, if he were to continue on, that kind of torpedoes the offseason, doesn't it?
Absolutely. No, 100%. And we've talked about already losing so many fantastic players, Steven Crowell, but most notably John Tonje, who's doing very well. Could be a great NBA prospect. But anyways, given those losses, I heard from a lot of people, all right, at least we have John Blackwell. If John Blackwell stays, and then he made his statement saying he would stay, later the statement he would stay, if not for the NBA, potentially, that would be a huge hole. He's not only an incredible player, but like everyone in Wisconsin loves him. He brings the energy. So it's both his style of play. He's great at crashing the boards and can pull from 3 too. He's an incredibly talented player. And I also think that now he'll be a junior and upperclassman. He can bring a lot of that energy and camaraderie for the team.
Does it feel like if he doesn't go this year, he's going to take that feedback, right? Whatever the NBA draft feedback is, which is part of the reason people do this. You go here, you get feedback, you improve on it. Does it feel like last year is probably the last year for Blackwell?
Yeah, I think this upcoming year would be his last. Granted, I'm not saying he's not good enough for the NBA, but where he'd be like sitting at if he were to get any sort of opportunity would not be great and not worth it, in my opinion. Another year, he has a great year at Wisconsin this upcoming year, and I think he's gone. Yeah,
I would agree, because it kind of feels like a guy who, unless he does love Madison, but obviously his goal, and he's talked about it, is my goal is to get to the NBA, to go play professionally. I think he takes that feedback, gets better, and then I don't think he can get his stock much higher than that. So I think he would then take the chance. I agree. Give me your thoughts on this offseason. So you and I haven't actually had a chance to talk about this Badgers basketball offseason yet. How did Greg Gard do in your eyes?
I think he's done well, given that I think he's actually great with transfer portal recruiting. Look at John Tanje, who I just mentioned was a transfer. The other thing I think that he's excellent at is the development of players, because right now everyone's looking at transfers and recruits, which we definitely touch on too. But the other thing is, throughout the years, you've seen how he develops Carter Gilmore, John Blackwell, because John Blackwell played a little bit his freshman year, far much more his sophomore year. And the name that I always come back to is Jack Janicki, because his freshman season he redshirted, so didn't play freshman year. So this past season, redshirt freshman, now will be a redshirt sophomore. And it was unbelievable how after not really playing freshman year, everyone was like, all right, like maybe he'll find the bench, be mostly a bench warmer next year, maybe come in a bit. But he was a great bench piece. Didn't actually start. However, he was excellent when he came in, utilized his time. It felt like when he was in, it was like now or never, did not take his time for granted, and he was an excellent piece for this team. So that's someone I'm kind of looking at from the development factor, where I think he can certainly start to get more minutes with the loss of other players.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I don't think gets talked about enough, because you focus a lot on John Tanje and what he did last year and what a portal pickup. But it was really that with the development of Blackwell and with the development of Winter and Gilmore, and Kamari McGee is a great example of that. Klesman throughout his career at Wisconsin. That is an area he's really been very successful with. And you look at this roster, you mentioned Janicki, but also a guy like Nolan Winter could take another big step going from a sophomore to a junior. And really, that's maybe where the biggest jumps need to happen. Blackwell coming back for his junior year, Nolan Winter. Yeah, that's a really good point. Even a guy like Robeson off the bench or Greppy off the bench. Is there an underrated guy in this roster you look at and say, that guy's not getting talked about enough?
I'd say,
I guess you already hit Janicki, but is there another one?
I think you could put Greppy in there.
Okay.
I think you could. I guess it makes sense not being talked enough without like the massive playing time, but I think it does. I think his size alone is intimidating, and I think he's made some poor shots instead of where they could be passes. And I think this is my point being, a lot of the areas where he hasn't done great are extremely fixable. You see players who have to work on aggressiveness and other things that are more innate and more have to be like you want them. Some of the mistakes he's made, I've seen as very just like not clean, sloppy mistakes. He's never struck me as someone that can't improve in the areas that haven't been great. That being said, I think he is great at taking shots. I think a lot of people have been upset, like, oh, he just takes this random three, just throws it up there. So I think he could work on his IQ a bit in reading the game. However, when he takes shots and when he does make that right decision, I think he's a very promising player. And the size is a big thing too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a spot on this. You look in this roster, backup five, some size is something that they need, losing Crowell. So if he can develop, or geez, man, I don't even know who would be the backup five if it's not for Greppy. You have Will Garlock coming in this year as a freshman. That's tough. Yeah, if Greppy can take that step where he just plays within his game, gives you that size for 5 to 10 minutes, that'd be absolutely huge. All right, we're going to take a quick second here. We're going to come back, talk about Xavier Zens, an in-state kid at a very familiar program to Badger fans, is picking up some steam. We're going to talk about his game, where he might fit in that 2026 class, and continue talking hoops with Grace. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is absolutely incredible. They are the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network for a reason. And with the basketball playoffs going on, this is a great time to get in on it. The basketball playoffs have been insane, plus Major League Baseball's going on. And I love betting on baseball with FanDuel, because every day it's this new lineup of starting pitchers, and you can bet on the parlay spread. You can do teasers. You can do every type of bet you want on FanDuel, including over-unders, including futures, right? Wisconsin, 5.5 wins. Where are you going to take that action? I think I'm going the over. You can do all of that over on FanDuel.com. They are absolutely incredible, fast, simple, easy to use, and you get quick payouts when you do hit. That's over at FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, this is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's come back with Grace. I want to talk about just a little bit Xavier Zens, but I want to start with John Tonje, who we just kind of touched on. How cool is it to see him kind of the journey and now playing? He just threw out the first pitch for, I think it was the White Sox. He's been kind of rising slowly up draft boards now into kind of maybe even late first round pick. How big of a deal is that for the program if you were to get it in the first round pick range?
I mean, it's huge. Obviously, you have some Frank Kaminsky and guys of those liking, but no one in a while. And I think it's been, some people have been like, oh, well, he only did a year at Wisconsin. It's like, you're right. That's why he's not going to have like a jersey retire or anything like that. But he had such an immense influence on this program alone, because even being there just a year and leaving, I think he taught so much character to the younger guys because of the way he played so aggressively. Best at drawing fouls, in my opinion, in the country this past season. I think he just left the program with a bang and kind of seemingly had an influence on Nolan Winter. I think he got so much more aggressive throughout the year. Steven Crow even as well. So I think the impact he had on the Badgers was huge. Everyone loved him, of course. So I think it's a cool tie to now see how far he potentially could go and is on track to go.
Yeah, I think he's about as popular as you could be for a guy who was here 1 year. You know, my son loved him. My son is 10, and he was like, I was like, oh man, because obviously they lost that heartbreaker to BYU. And my son's like, that's all right. They'll get him next year. John will get him next year. My son hasn't quite realized that people graduate yet. I was like, oh, buddy, I'm so sorry. He's not going to be there. But like, so popular. And one of the things, I was talking to someone inside the Wisconsin program, and he said, you know, Tanja's a guy who could have brought a lot more media attention to himself, but he just was about the team. He was about his teammates. And yeah, I just am rooting along. I think a lot of Badger fans are. Let's talk about Xavier Zens. So this is someone that you kind of brought up, 6'7" forward, probably a small forward coming out of Wisconsin Lutheran. Wisconsin has recently started tracking him. Greg Gard's been tracking him. What are your thoughts here on Xavier?
I think the first thing of note, aside from his play, is that he's in state, which has been a big criticism of Greg Gard. Oh, all the talent leaves Wisconsin. You have to draw from outside. So I think that was a good thing to see when I was researching him a bit. And so he said he's going to come to the program's camp in early June, and then his high school, Wisconsin Lutheran, have like a team camp. I don't know if it's every year this year, not really sure, but they have a team camp towards the end of June. So essentially the Badgers will get a look at him twice, which I think is huge. And the other thing is I've read he has a few, maybe more Big Ten offers coming his way, but right now it's mostly mid-major offers. So I think this is a great time to throw interest at him, kind of steal him before he gets more popularity. Honestly, he kind of reminds me of someone that has the potential to be like a Steven Crow. Watching some of his tapes, he's extremely patient, and that's what I really liked about Crow, is that he backs into defenders, and it's not just crashing into the boards. I mean, when able to, but he really has that sort of patience and force when needed. I believe he was over 50% from beyond the arc last season. So yeah, definitely a player I'd be very excited to have. So I'm glad the Badgers are taking a look at him.
Yeah, he does. Watching film, he does have a deliberate play style, which if you were to describe Steven Crow, deliberate would definitely be a word you would use. To some fans, he was too deliberate. I love Steven Crow, but he definitely has kind of a control. He shoots from three. He can do a lot of things. He feels like a Badger type of player. Let me ask you this, because obviously you're not from in-state. You go to Wisconsin, but you live on the East Coast. Wisconsin people who grow up here get frustrated that talent doesn't stay home. Do you think it matters?
I think seeing our softball team, which sounds like a random comparison, but seeing our softball team is very, very Wisconsin heavy. And I've never seen, also have to give credits to the head coach, Yvette Healy, because she's amazing, one of the kindest souls, but her team, the camaraderie is unbelievable. And she's told me before, like, I'm pretty sure it's a verbatim quote because I remembered it. She was like, yeah, I just like finding the diamonds in the rough. Like, she will find the person that, maybe isn't getting the most media attention, but ends up being a star in Wisconsin. I think it honestly does help in an era where there's the transfer portal and NIL, in a lot of people's opinions, is ruining things. I think having people that are just bleed Badger red and they just really want to, you have the stories, oh, I always wanted to be a Badger. I think that's great. Obviously not realistic for everybody, but I think when you get a lot of stories saying, this was my dream, my dad went here, which is more likely if they live in Wisconsin. I think it's clearly not imperative, but I think having a few Wisconsinites is nice.
I like the point with the portal, because who are the character guys on last year's team? Obviously, Tonje was one of those guys, but so was Kamari McGee, Wisconsin kid. Max Klesman was, even though they came through the portal, they were Wisconsin kids. Max Klesman, these guys that were really maybe the engines of it. Carter Gilmore, the real culture heart guys, they're Wisconsin guys. They're not the most talented necessarily, but they are the locker room guys, the culture guys, the heart guys. Yeah, I think if you could find the right balance, it makes sense. What do you think of what's your opinion of Greg Gard? Just in the sense of Wisconsin fans are somewhat split. They really like him. There is an element of Wisconsin fans that are frustrated the March runs haven't been deeper. Where do you fall on this?
I am, I'd say, higher on him than the average fan. I think after last year, the John Tonje thing was I think kind of pulled a lot of people, but not only that, because obviously that was the best pick from the portal. Not only that, I think his development, which I've discussed, is so underrated because with the transfer portal, there's a lot of guys, and you'll see a Daniel Freitag who's yeah, I'm out. But for the guys who then do stay, that Gard can convince to stay, you see the increase in playing time, and it's unbelievable. March has been a struggle, and that's why, of course, I'm not glorifying this man. I think there definitely are some room for improvement because I think we typically start the season off pretty darn strong end of February, March, and it seems we're going to go into the tournament after these few losses a little less confident. So I do think there's areas where he can improve, be more consistent. I also think potentially demeanor, which sounds odd, but if you think about fan favorite coaches and people that just bring that energy, he doesn't really strike me as that guy. He gets the job done. He's a great coach, high basketball IQ. So it's not necessary, of course, to have a great personality, but I think having a bit of more team camaraderie could be a good thing. Get your team involved, get the fans involved a little bit. I don't know. That's probably being very picky, but I do think that he could bring more energy to the stands and overall better team energy.
Well, I think you go from a Bo Ryan, and Bo Ryan was the fieriest guy outside of Fran McCaffrey on the sideline. And Greg Gard, that's just not his personality. He's a little more reserved. I find him extremely easy to root for, just in the sense that I think he does it the right way. He from Wisconsin, he cares about the program. He doesn't run people off. But yeah, you got to make a deep March run at some point. You just have to. That's the name of the game. You don't have to do it every year because that's unrealistic, but I think he does need a deeper run. All right, we're going to take a second here. We're going to come back and talk about the flurry of activity on the women's basketball side. I haven't had a chance to talk to Grace yet about Coach P, what she's bringing in, what she thinks of the hire. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show. And as always, a quick second to say thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. All right, let's jump back into this. We got Grace coming back on. Another topic that we haven't really had a chance to talk about is Badgers made a new basketball coaching hire on the women's side. Obviously, that was a while ago, but you and I haven't had a chance to chop it up on the show. What are your thoughts on Coach Pingeton? Initial reaction to it, and then has your reaction changed over the last month and a half or so?
I think that's a good question with change too. I mean, I looked her up. I'd heard the name, but didn't know too much about her, to be honest. When I heard about the hire, looked her up. And the thing that I saw as maybe into a week that followed was there's now 4 coaches on staff. 3 of them, including head coach, are from Missouri, which I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way a little bit because it's clear that you can just drag coaches from a team. And the thing is, Missouri is a team that has not been greatly successful in the past years. They went 14-18 this past season. And so not my favorite choice. However, I think it would have been a little bit better if it was like, all right, you're drawing from other places, because clearly your coaching style with these other coaches wasn't that successful. But what if you bring in other talent? And they have Massengale, I think, yes, who played for the WNBA briefly before that, Tennessee. So that was nice to see. But I just think not only stressing that Missouri hasn't been a very color-decorated program as of recent, but the fact that you're bringing the same coaches that haven't been successful into a new environment. I'm not too happy about it.
No, that's an interesting point, though, that I haven't really heard brought up that way. Because the last couple of years at Missouri, that program was on a downhill trajectory. So, and you basically, to your point, taking that entire coaching staff to some degree and just moved it to Madison. Why, if it wasn't working there, why would it work here?
Yeah.
Let me tell you my reaction to this, and you tell me if you think I'm crazy or not. I think it's a hire by Chris McIntosh, to bring in somebody that's been, for lack of a better term, an adult in the room. Because the last couple hires at Wisconsin have been more, a little more flashy, a younger, maybe up and coming star. We need to build a foundation at Wisconsin for women's basketball. We need somebody who's been in a major conference for a long time and they can be okay. Maybe it's setting the floor, the ceiling lower, but the floor higher.
No, that makes sense. I think a lot of people, including me, a big thing I wanted to see was like, if it's not flashy, get like UW Whitewater, UW Platteville, which I'm kind of spitting random names. I know there were a few, maybe Green Bay, that was successful. So not sure. Some of those might have done poorly. Point is, I've seen a lot of people want coaches like that. I don't think it's like something to be devastated about, I think she has the potential to do okay. And the other thing is, you're at rock bottom, essentially. Like you can take that little, like, first of all, not a attractive coaching job. Like, you're not just going to get a top coach in the first place or draw them from somewhere, get them to switch their school alma mater. So there's that factor where it's like, all right, we also do have to be realistic here. And the other aspect, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what I will be impressed in, say, give her 3 years, 2 years maybe, if you're being really picky, of how she builds this team that now has 7 players staying from last year. The best, of course, Sarah Williams transferring to UConn. Happy for her, because that's awesome. But you're left with 7 players. The vast majority of them did not play at all or very little last season. The only one of 5 was Ronnie Porter, and a big bench piece was Lily Cron. Everyone else is gone. So I think you have to give her a chance at this point. Of course, what else are you going to do? But I'm going to be impressed if she is able to bring them to a Big Ten tournament, say, just in the next 3 years. Give her 3 years to build this program, see who she can bring in. You can't expect great things when this program's really at rock bottom, but in 3 years, if she's able to somewhat impress, that's when I'm like, all right.
Yeah. I think getting Ronnie Porter back was big. She averaged 8 and 5 last year. There is an element of, gosh, this team was really bad at points. So you have to be careful how much you celebrate pieces. It's very much like your Missouri point. You're bringing in a staff that maybe wasn't very successful. You also have to be a little reserved when you're bringing back players from a team that was really bad. But I think Porter's a good piece. She averaged 8 and 5. Cron could shoot a little bit. I think she's nice off the bench. Big picture, can this program succeed? Because I think we keep going back to, this is now the 4th coach, in the last 12 years-ish. Can you win at Wisconsin for women's basketball? It's just big picture. And then I wanted to ask about a couple of the specific transfers coming in, because I think there's a couple of interesting names here. But can this be successful?
I feel like it should be. When, say, you don't know much about Wisconsin women's basketball, and I just say the name, I don't know, it's someone that's not a big fan, but you hear the name Wisconsin, it's a brand name, and you think oh, like they're probably good, right? Like you mix them in with any other Big Ten school. So the fact that I think there are people that would maybe not get the craziest offer, might not be able to play at UConn, UCLA, but you would think at least that it would be like, oh, Wisconsin's great. And I think that's because the reason I'm saying it in like such an odd, hesitant way is I don't know if that's even true because clearly that hasn't been happening. I think it's going to take a long time. I think it's possible, but this isn't just, and again, this is why I'm saying 3 years, not 3 years to get a national championship, but so I'm saying 3 years for improvement because you're literally starting from the ground.
Yeah, you're starting at rock bottom. Yeah. I mean, that's where this program is. For people who don't follow it as closely, this is, like Purdue has been in the Big Ten in football. I mean, that's where Wisconsin is in the hierarchy of women's basketball in the Big Ten, and they shouldn't be. There's talent in state. Well, this university and these fans, they support really good women's programs if the success is there. There's resources in the Big Ten. It just doesn't make sense to me why we are so bad at this sport. And I love women's basketball. I used to coach women's basketball. It kills me, but we're so terrible all the time. And I think that's maybe kind of coaching some of my thoughts on Coach P is I want this to work. I really would like this to work. Let's talk about the portal. So she brought in, I think my latest tracker here, I think between the portal and recruiting, because Nikki Kirsten was a really kind of nice high school prep prospect they're bringing in. Seven players, is that right? Who in this list of players coming in do you really like? Who stands out to you?
That's funny you said that because that's exactly who I was gonna say is Nikki Kirsten, 5'8" point guard, and you're talking about women's, but still 5'8" is not tall. So when I see that, a lot of people would hesitate and be like, oh, but when I see that, I get excited because that means you must be scrappy and you must be aggressive. Think of Ronnie Porter. I mean, she's 5'4". You can't be a D1 5'4" player and be like average. You have to be pretty darn good. And so that's why initially I was like, all right, I'm interested in her from Illinois. And I was right. I watched some of her tape. Aggressive, scrappy, high basketball IQ is how I can describe it. I watched a highlight reel where I swear like 8 out of the 10 plays she was just jumping on the ball. Like it was kind of ridiculous to the point where I was like, yeah, we need someone like that. We've struggled a lot with rebounds and she was all over that, like not afraid to truck someone essentially. So I'm excited to see what she can do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a pretty skilled player, watching some of her film as well. Another one, and listen, I don't really know these players yet, but when you look on the surface, it's kind of a surface look. Gift Uchuna. Am I pronouncing that right? Uchuna?
I'm not positive if that's right, but it's how I would guess too.
Okay. Come from Southern Illinois, averaged 14.5 points, 12.8 rebounds last year. Like gives you some legit size. I'm interested there. And then the other one I'm interested, I thought was pretty interesting was Destiny Howell coming from Howard, averaging 15 and 4. There's some shooting she's bringing in and some size she's bringing in. Again, like portal is hit or miss. We've seen it on the football side, even basketball. We love Tanjay. You also look at Xavier Amos and some of the other pieces there, Cameron Hunter, that didn't work out for Greg Gard. But it feels like at least there's activity and there's upward talent being added to this roster.
Yeah, and after Wisconsin losing pretty much every player, new coach, I will say it's pretty impossible. Like, I don't even know how they're getting these players. I'm so happy they are, but it's like really hard. And you can see how they truly are digging. For instance, Southern Illinois had a god-awful season last season. They did terrible, like maybe 2, 3, 4 wins, if I remember correctly. But Gift, who played for the team, did really well. So you could say, oh, she did really well, but this team is really bad and they didn't play in this conference. Could be that, or it could be she's going to be a breakout player and was playing with teammates that maybe weren't at the level she's at. So it's kind of something where I don't know the answers and I don't know how great these players are going to be. But if you're Wisconsin, there's no really other choice but then to take a chance on these players that you find. I mean, Howard, right? Not a lot of players are, coaches are looking from the transportal there, especially in these like different teams that aren't from the Big Ten or SEC, teams like that. So I think when you're Wisconsin, you really do have to find the diamond in the rough, and that's what they're trying to do. can't say if it will be successful or not, but I think Badger fans have to remember successful doesn't mean over 750. It might mean 500 would be awesome.
Yes. No, I would 500. If she can get to 500 in year one, that'd be a miracle considering where the program's been at. Like,
Yeah.
I mean that honestly, like that would give you so much optimism to go forward. I'm going to wrap it up here because I could talk to you about women's basketball all day. But you mentioned Sarah Williams. There's no replacing Sarah Williams. Left in the portal, went to UConn, which I think is awesome. Definitely going to be cheering for her this year. How the thought I keep coming back to is Sarah Williams, who was legitimately awesome. Like she's phenomenal. How is this team that bad with a player like Sarah Williams?
I mean, that I thought about a lot of that too, and genuinely, she was for a while their team, which is why I'm so terrified, because a lot of players would be like, oh, I don't have a good angle. I can basically chuck it anywhere. And Sarah Williams at her height is going to catch it and crash the boards. And she did. So to answer your question, I'm not answering your question because I don't know and I'm scared.
Yeah, that's a great answer, actually. We're going to wrap up there. Grace, thank you again. I think the third time you've been on the show, which is phenomenal. We'd love to do it again. Really do appreciate it. For everyone tuning in, thank you for watching Locked On Badgers. Come up tomorrow. We got Nick Osen coming up this week, Rajiv, a lot of people coming up as well. Hopefully a recruit as well if he comes through. So on Wisconsin, and we will definitely talk to you later.